Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, buddy. Well, y'all, I've been thinking about what I was going to say about Johnnie for the last 6 months. And they always told me if you study long, you study wrong, and trust me, based on my experience, that does happen. Well, one thing I can say, I really did enjoy his workshop earlier, and he brought home a lot of real good points. And I feel like I've been knowing Johnnie ever since I got sober, because maybe about six months in my sobriety, someone handed me a tape and said, listen to this and you're going to like him. And one thing I did like about him is he said, if the date's open, it's yours. So the year before last, I called him and wanted him to come down and share with us at another function, and the date wasn't open and it wasn't ours. And I called him last year and the date was open and it was ours. And I've called pure D heck ever since. Johnnie's a good guy, but he, being just like me, insists on having things his way. No. But, now, the guy that traveled with James over here, and I don't know his name, he said, you're dressed up better than the speaker. You're trying to outdo him. I said, please don't tell him that. I said, well, the one thing my sponsor always told me, I don't care what I put on, all I ever be is a dressed up garbage can anyway, so it don't really matter. But without any further ado, let's give a warm Union Convention welcome to Johnnie H. of Long Beach, California.
Hi, everybody. My name's Johnnie, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm glad to be here tonight, and I'm glad to be sober. I'm glad to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to thank my friend Tony for extending the privilege of participating in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting. It's always been my opinion, and I hope it always remains such, that it's some type of a privilege to be allowed to come and sit in these rooms. I hope I don't ever get it through my sick head that I have a right to everything that goes on in Alcoholics Anonymous. Just because I was lucky enough to stumble in here and get sober and stay that way. Whenever I'm asked to do anything in Alcoholics Anonymous, I consider it some type of an unearned gift, which I really don't deserve. Because I've been sober for a long time, and during that period of sobriety, I've had the opportunity to go back over my life and look at my life prior to coming into Alcoholics Anonymous time and time again. And I looked deeply in there and tried to find something that I had done before I come to Alcoholics Anonymous that would entitle me to live the way I live today. And so help me God, I can't find it. I can't find anything in the world back there that I would have ever done in my life good enough that would allow me to live the way I live today. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. So I have to assume, without any doubt, that this is some type of an unearned gift from this God I discovered sitting in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe that we get sober by the grace of God. I believe that. But I also believe we stay sober by the application of these principles in our lives one day at a time. I think the grace of God can be removed if we move ourselves in and take over the reins and start running our own lives. Now, I'm extremely pleased to be here tonight, fully clothed and in my right mind. I really tell you that for no particular reason other than the fact that the longer I stay sober in Alcoholics Anonymous, the more necessary it becomes for me to remember from whence I came. And I never want to forget that a little over 42 years ago, maybe 43 years ago right now, I came to in a cell in solitary confinement in a maximum security penitentiary, drifting in and out of total insanity. Now, because of a loving God that has expressed himself through our program called Alcoholics Anonymous, I don't have to crawl around on my knees like an animal anymore. If I don't get nothing else out of this deal, I guess I could live with it all the way home. Makes me feel good. Now, I'd like to be able to stand here tonight and tell you that's where alcohol took me to. Oh, I'd love to be able to tell you that. That's where I took me to. The only thing that alcohol ever did in my life, it kept me alive long enough to find Alcoholics Anonymous. See, I'm as sure as I'm standing here, if I hadn't taken a drink of alcohol, I'd have probably blown my brains out before I was 9 years old. I've always been some type of a misfit anyhow. I wandered around that I didn't quite understand in a world that I didn't know anything about, and I felt kind of odds about it, and restless and irritable and discontent. I didn't realize then that I was suffering from probably the most deadly disease that's ever been known to mankind. It's probably killed more people in the 7,000 years of recorded history of it than anything that's ever been known to mankind. Now, I didn't know I had that. I didn't know those were the symptoms of this illness that I had. I didn't have anything about it at all. I was needing some type of an answer. I was kind of restless. And I knew I needed an answer, but I didn't know what my problem was. Now, it's hard to seek the answer to a problem if you don't know what the problem is. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know that I had this stuff going on inside of me. I knew a lot about whiskey. Everybody in my family drank whiskey. I mean, they were whiskey drinking people. I mean, they made it, and they sold it, and they drank it. And they do what people who make whiskey, sell whiskey, and drink whiskey do on Saturday night. They gathered up and beat the hell out of one another. That's what they did. That's what they did. I mean, it was like whip 'em. I mean, it was just terrible around my grandma's house. I mean, they just tore each other up, drank each other's whiskey, and stole each other's women. And I guess whoever survived was the king for the week. I don't know how they worked out their little situation. But you know the strange thing about that is that I understood that. I understood the violence. I understood all the innuendos and the backhanded stuff that was going on there. What I was never able to quite comprehend is watch these people do this to one another on Saturday. Now watch them on Wednesday put their arms around one another and say things like, "We love one another because we're family." And I guess, I don't know whether I said it consciously or not, I guess I must have said to myself, if that's what love is, you can keep it. Because I don't remember uttering it to another human being prior to coming to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous for a long time after I was here. It was not in my vocabulary. I just didn't use the word. I'm looking for a way out of this to limb a long time before I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. I believe my entire lifetime, from the cradle to right up to this moment, or till the moment I discovered the answer, was in the search. I believe I needed this answer. It was the most driving thing in my life. I had to find what was going on. I had to know what was wrong with me. I didn't understand what was going on. I looked at other people. I knew they didn't feel the way I felt. I looked at my older brother. He wasn't like me. I didn't understand my older brother. He just sat around and listened to the radio. And I wanted to be out there where the action was. And I didn't understand with my brother. I didn't like my uncles because they went to penitentiaries. I didn't like my aunts because they worked in whorehouses on the other side of the tracks. I didn't like my dad because he beat up my mother. I didn't like my mother because she beat up my dad. I didn't like either one of them because they beat me up. I saw what whiskey did to people. And my reaction to that was, I'm not going to drink whiskey. I'm not going to drink. Look what whiskey does to these people. I watched these people sober, and I watched them drunk. And my common denominator about that was alcohol. These people drank, and they do these things. I am not going to drink. I'm going to find a way out of this thing. I looked up one day, saw my grandmother. Now, my grandmother lived till she was 90 years old, and she never took a drink of alcohol or smoked a cigarette in her life. My grandmother wouldn't think it's a big deal that I've been sober over 41 years. Big deal, she'd say. I ain't had a drink for 90. They're like that, you know, them people. I'd look at her and say, you should have had a couple, Granny, make you feel better from time to time, for Christ's sake. But my grandmother got everything she needed out of her church. I watched Grandma every Sunday morning, and her doors on her house where her kids were laying all over the floor in various stages of disarray. She'd step over the bodies, put the best thing she had on, and she was gone. She's gone for a couple hours, then she came back, and something had happened to her. I could see it as clear as I could see you. She's a little lighter in her step and a little easier in her being. And she danced around these people and cleaned them up and sang songs to Jesus. And I took a look at that. And I filed that in my keen alcoholic mind. Now, for you who are new in Alcoholics Anonymous or looking this over, this is the only place in the world you're ever going to hear about the keen alcoholic mind. I'll flat guarantee you the Alamounts are not going to mention the keen alcoholic mind. They may say the keen alcoholic got up last night and peed in the linen closet, but they ain't going to tell you how keen we are. We will. Ask us a question, we're going to give you an answer. We may not know what the hell we're talking about, but we'll say something. Yeah. But I had some kind of an idea that all I would have to do is go where my grandmother goes and do what my grandmother does, and I'd be like my grandmother. See, I'm not like my grandmother. My grandmother's not alcoholic. I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was bodily and mentally different from my grandmother. I didn't know that at all. So I went with my grandmother as a child instead of my grandmother's church with my grandmother and waited for whatever happened to my grandmother to happen to me. And it didn't happen, I suppose, because I don't remember it happening. But what I learned later in life, that there was nothing in the world wrong with my grandmother's church anyhow. But there was something wrong with the jackass sitting in it, me. See, what I'm doing in that church is what I did all my life prior to coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and for a long time after I'm here. I'm looking for something way out here to make me feel better in here, which only goes to prove to me the problem's always been there. And the first relief I ever got in life, I got sitting on the back porch of my grandfather's house with my grandfather. I'm watching my grandpa drink whiskey out of a fruit jar. And my grandfather put that down and went somewhere, and I picked it up and took a drink of it. That's all I did. I did something I said I'd never do. I took a drink of alcohol. The next couple of minutes of my life is what makes me an alcoholic anyhow. Oh, I'm not an alcoholic because I spent the next 20 years of my life creating mayhem out there in the world. I'm an alcoholic because I have some type of an abnormal reaction to alcohol. And what I damn near died learned was that everybody who drinks alcohol does not get the same type of reaction from it that I do. I didn't understand that when I got here. Because alcohol was a wonderful thing in my life. It went down inside of me, kind of stilled the screaming madness. It took me from the black pit of nothingness and stood me into the gray fringes of the business of living and installed in me some type of arrogance that said, damn you world, it's all right. I'm not good enough to be around the good people, but I'm too good to be around the bad people. It's okay right here. That's what alcohol did for me. But you see, that's not the thing that drove me into the gates of insanity and death and beyond. What got me is what our book talks about that happens to alcoholics of my type once I put alcohol into my system. Not before, not thinking about it, not reading the billboard. Once I put alcohol into my system, then I'm drinking to overcome a craving that's beyond all human understanding and beyond all human help. I didn't know that. Because what happened to me when I drank alcohol happened to me every time I drank alcohol for the next 20 years of my life. The pattern never changed. I took a drink of alcohol, and 3 days later they pulled me out from underneath a bridge, stood me in front of a judge, and sent me to the Hutchinson State Reform School. 20 years later, I took a drink of alcohol. They pulled me out of a car in Compton and stood me in front of a judge and sentenced me to 20 years in the penitentiary. Now, that's what happened when I drank. I got drunk and went places. I just traveled around out there. I went from reform school to junior penitentiaries to nut houses. Now they call them treatment centers. I'm a little more partial to nut house, if you want to know the truth. I mean, it's a little more macho, for Christ's sake. I mean, if you're going to be bad, you ought to be bad. I mean, don't quit drinking because you puke a little. Hang in there. Give it everything you got. I mean, you got to, Alcoholics Anonymous works a hell of a lot better when you run on options. You got to work at being an alkie. I mean, you just don't take a couple of pops and check yourself in somewhere. You got to work at being an alkie. I mean, you got to end up with rusty zippers. You got to have all kinds of strange things happen to you. You got to wake up and somewhere along the line with your roof of your mouth sunburned, for Christ's sake. It's just, there's all kinds of things you got to do to be an alkie. I mean, you just don't, it takes training. You really got to put some effort into being an alkie. Hell, anybody can be a drug addict. All you got to do is put drugs in your system. Everybody can't be an alkie because they can't work at it that hard. That's really the truth of the matter. You see, everybody can't be an alcoholic. And there's a difference between the drug addict and drug addiction and alcoholism. One of the big lies that's perpetrated in the world is all the same illness,
No, it's not. No, it's not. Anybody can be addicted to drugs. Anybody can. All you got to do is put drugs in their system for a period of time, they'll become addicted to it. Everybody can't be an alcoholic. Maybe only 1 people in 10 who drinks alcohol has that abnormal reaction from it. And that's what Bill Wilson wrote about in our book called Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, I don't know that. I don't know what makes me an alcoholic. I don't know where it came from. I don't even know I'm an alcoholic. I never one time ever walked out of one of them institutions and said to myself, self, do you realize how long it's been since you've had a drink of alcohol? Do you realize how long it's been since you've had a series of electroshock treatments? Why don't you have a drink? Hey, self, why don't you have a drink of alcohol and go out there and kill your baby brother? Hey, self, why don't you have a drink of alcohol and go out there and destroy your mother one more time? Hey, self, why don't you go out there and just rip them up and tear them up and at the ripe old age of 26, 27 years old, in face down in a cell in solitary confinement, drifting in and out of total insanity. Go ahead and have a drink. No. I never drink to have that happen to me. I never drink for any reason. I never drink to have a party. I never drank to get drunk. I never drank to get oblivion. I never drank for any reason. I took a drink of alcohol for one reason and one reason only. Because after I'd been sober for a period of time, I needed to go, whew. That's why I drink. But you see, that's all the disease of alcoholism and the phenomenon of craving requires for me to trigger this murderless obsession of mine to drink until the end of oblivion. And it happened over and over and over and over again. And I never had an idea. When I came to in that cell in solitary confinement in that penitentiary, if you would have walked in there and said to me, do you realize that you're an alcoholic? That's your problem? I'd have said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. If you'd have put a lie detector test on my arm and said to me, are you an alcoholic? I'd have said, no, I'm not an alcoholic. Needle wouldn't have moved. They could have called me a lot of things. I would have known what I was anyhow. By that time, I'd built so many images around myself and lived so many falsehoods and so many lies in so many different places that I didn't have a clue what was behind all those masquerades that I wore. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. But I do know that when I came to in that cell, there wasn't a single solitary soul left upon the face of this earth that would send me a penny postcard. They were all gone. But they should be gone. And I didn't have any right to have any of them back. I still don't have any right to have anything good and decent in my life just because I was lucky enough to stumble into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous and get sober and stay that way. Everything in my life that's good and decent is a direct result of gifts that I received from this God I discovered in the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not entitled to a lot of things. I don't have any right to all these kind of things. If I had rights, I'd have to destroy them. I don't have choices about whether I drink or don't drink. As long as I had the power of choice, I chose not to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. As long as I had the power of choice, I chose not to do these things. Was stripped of all rights and all choices and crawling into Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't even come to Alcoholics Anonymous to get sober. I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous because the institution I was in letting women come in there. I came to my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous over 41 and a half years ago to smell perfume. And I've been honking and sniffing around her ever since. It doesn't make any difference why you come to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you come here long enough, sooner or later you'll either do something or you leave. There's no difference. I mean, whether you come for the dance or whatever you come for, the food or whatever you come for, just see what's going on. Sooner or later, if you're an alcoholic, you have to come to that place in life where you either have to surrender or leave. There's no choice in the matter here. Choices are just things that are gone out the door. You know, I've told that story about coming to Alcoholics Anonymous that fateful day in November 1959 because they brought women, but that's not the reason I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Not today. I know the reason I came here. That may have been the attraction that brought me to that meeting that day, but that's not what brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. You see, my last time out, I killed me. My last time out, I ended up in the old Los Angeles County Jail, dead on arrival, more dead than alive. I was strapped down on a bed in the old prison ward in the old Los Angeles County Jail, and the doctor told me I was going to die and there's nothing he could do for me. And the doctor left that day, and he was gone all day and all night, and I laid there in that bed waiting for death to come. And he wandered back in the next morning and looked at my chart. He looked at me and he said, "Son, you're going to die and nothing we can do for you." And I laid there and looked at him. And somewhere along that period of time, 2 or 3 days into this madcap, this declaration by this doctor and me, the idea came to me that I was going to live and not die. That I was going to get up off that bed and go to the penitentiary and come back out and start that rat race all over again, and God knows I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to do that. I'm here to tell you that there's a worse fear in this world than dying. The fear of living in a hell that you don't know how to handle and you don't know what's wrong with you, and that you're going to have to go on like this for eternity. On and on and on. My fear was that I was going to get up off that bed and not die. I was going to go to the penitentiary. I was going to come back out and start that rat race all over again. It was going to go on and on and on and on and on. And God knows I couldn't take it no more. Because no matter what I was doing anymore, I couldn't turn off the nightmares. I couldn't erase the nightmares that I had created in my madcap world through this selfish, self-centered world of mine. I just couldn't understand. I couldn't get rid of my mother's face. I couldn't get that picture of standing outside my brother's grave, handcuffed between those 2 detectives while they buried him. I couldn't get those things out of my mind. They waked me up in a cold sweat, and I didn't know what to do. That to me was hell. I was never going to get out of that no more. And death seemed like a wonderful thing. And one night, because I knew nothing better to do, I screamed out the only prayer that ever said in my life. I said, "Oh, God, help me." I thought for a long, long time nothing had happened, because there was no blinding flashes of light. Nobody come running down the hall with a dozen donuts saying, "We got an AA meeting down there." I didn't get up and wander off into the tulip somewhere. I just went to sleep for a little while. And I don't know how many of you ever kicked a 2-year heroin habit, but that's what I was doing. That's the first time I'd been asleep in a long time. I'll tell you how sick I was. 2 weeks later, I'm up running around the jail looking for some more of the poison, putting me back on the bed I'd just gotten off of. And I found it. And I got loaded again. And there's a very good reason for that. Right here in the back of my mind is the knowledge. The knowledge. Not the idea, but the knowledge that when I can't stand life on life terms anymore, I know what makes the big hurt go away. I know what makes it go away. And if you put me in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong set of circumstances, I'll be drunk. I'm an alcoholic. I don't have any more choice about that than I do about flying around this room. Put me in the wrong place at the wrong time in the wrong set of circumstances, and I'll be drunk. I don't like to hear people say, "I can't ever drink again." If you're an alcoholic, you can drink again, because that's the answer to the alcoholic. It's not the problem, it's the answer. And I may have to drink again someday. You can never tell. I haven't got any lock on this thing. That day that I wandered into that first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I can remember like it was yesterday. It was an old Quonset hut of a building and a penitentiary up in the mountains, the Tehachapi Mountains, and it was cold, and people come across the yard, and I follow up, and I moved in, and I sit down in the back row, where people like me sit. I leaned up against the wall on what I call my throne of contempt, and I reared back with my shades on and my coat collar up, because I was cool. If I'd have been any cooler when I got here, I'd have probably froze to death, for God's sake. Remember looking up the backboard, I saw 2 big A's. I thought I'd wandered in some type of an anti-aircraft brigade. I didn't know what was wrong with me. It says that this clown said next to me, "What is this?" He said, "It's Alcoholics Anonymous." And I sunk down in my seat because I didn't want anybody to see the big gangster hanging out with them winos. Been Gangsters Anonymous or Over Hip Anonymous or some other type of an anonymous. I'd have been up there waving my hand, but I didn't want anybody to know I was an alcoholic. I didn't know what was wrong with me anyhow. And what's really frightening about that to me sometimes is that I'm sitting here that day in that meeting, and I'm staring at the answer that I had sold my soul for, but I don't recognize the answer because I don't know what the problem is. It's hard to seek the answer to a problem if I don't know what the problem is. And the sad part about that is most of the people who come to Alcoholics Anonymous, they haven't got a clue what's wrong with them. I didn't. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I didn't know I suffered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. I didn't have a clue what was wrong with me. And I sit there in my little throne of contempt and do what people like me do. I sit around and waited for these women to get up and tell their racy stories. One of them got up and drank, and said she drank for a long time. You could look at her and know she'd been somewhere for a long time. I mean, there weren't very many young, pretty girls hanging around Alcoholics Anonymous when I got here. At least they weren't bringing them up to that penitentiary where I was at, for her sake. She said, I said, I bet you did. I bet you drink bad stuff, too. See, I knew everything when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm a walking encyclopedia of useless information. I know so much about what ain't true, I don't know what is true, and there I sit. For all intents and purposes, a dead man, staring at this answer that I had sold my soul for, but I don't know what the answer is because I don't know what the problem is. And there I sit. I'm fascinated by the people of Alcoholics Anonymous, as much then as I am today, probably more so today than I was then. I didn't understand what these people did. I didn't understand why anybody would get up out of their homes on Sunday and buy their own gasoline and drive 180 miles up those old back roads and spend 2 hours talking to a room full of people who didn't want to listen to them. People like me who would sit in the back row and made fun of them. I didn't understand people like that. I'll tell you how sick that is if you really want to know. Here I am sitting in the penitentiary. I don't know when I'm going home, and I'm making fun of people who are leaving in an hour. Oh, but I'm hip. I'm so hip the balls of my feet tickle me when I walk. And I'm sitting reading. You know what reason I really don't understand these people? The reason I really don't understand these people is because I'm a taker. And for the first time in my life, I'm looking upon givers. I'm looking at people who are given a little for the hell of giving it, and I don't understand that. See, takers don't understand givers. Because takers don't hang out with givers. Takers only hang out with takers. That's why all takers are losers, if you're looking at one. And I don't understand this. I don't understand why anybody would do anything like this. It's beyond my comprehension to realize why anybody would give up their days and their nights and get up there and go to do these things and talk to people. I didn't understand anything. But I knew they had something. I didn't know what it was. I was fascinated by them. And so I asked one day, what do you get out of coming up here anyhow? You like to look at the animals in the cages? What's your deal anyhow? And they looked at me with one of those deep Alcoholics Anonymous penetrating looks and said these deep, complicated phrases that people like me must have. They said, well, son, when you can answer that question, you won't have to ask it. You know, I pondered that for a long time, trying to figure out what he was talking about. But you see, when you hipsters and you fence riders in Alcoholics Anonymous can understand why people would spend all day in the kitchen, why you can understand why people will take time to set up the meetings, why people will take their time to be on committees and do all these things, to be general service and central service and all these other things that you do in Alcoholics Anonymous. When you can understand why people will make 12-step calls and give their time and their effort to alcoholics, you won't have to ask the question, because you'll be making that transition from a taker to a giver, and then you won't have to ask the question anymore. And if there's anything I know about Alcoholics Anonymous, it's very simply this. My old sponsor, Norm Alpe, when he was alive, used to talk a great deal about crossing over some invisible line from controlled to uncontrolled drinking. And I don't have any qualms about that whatsoever. But I'm here to tell you without a doubt that there is a line here in Alcoholics Anonymous. An invisible line maybe, but there is a line here. And if you're an alcoholic of my type and you don't cross over that line, you're going to die drunk. Or you're going to blow your brains out. Or you're going to go insane. That is a moment of truth. I don't care what anybody says. That is the truth, and that line is there, and if you don't cross over it, you are going to die drunk or you're going to go insane. Now, if you're not an alcoholic, what the hell difference does it make anyhow? Your life is not on the line. You can just hang out here and get the heat off and stick around for the dance and eat the food and leave whenever you feel like it. But if you're an alcoholic, that line is there, and you better cross over it or you're going to die drunk. And that's the line where you've got to cross over from being a taker to being a giver. And if you don't cross over, then you're an alcoholic of my type. You're a dead man or a dead woman, whatever it may be. And the reason I know that is my book says so. My book says that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of all of my problems, and I must be rid of it or it kills me. My selfishness is the root of my problems, and it will kill me if I don't rid myself of it. And the only way I can get rid of it is be more concerned about you one day at a time than I am about myself. That is the only thing I know of. I don't know what's going on in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous when I'm new. I'm lost here. And what you proved to me in my early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, that I'm not an alcoholic. You proved to me without a doubt. So I sit in your meetings and listen. I wanted to be an alcoholic, but you proved to me I was not an alcoholic by what you said from these podiums. So you got to be careful what you say from these podiums. I'm sitting at these meetings and you're sitting at podiums and say, I used to drink. Now I don't drink anymore. And everything is just wonderful. I say, I guess I'm not alcoholic then. I'm not drinking either, and I'm crazy. God, I wish I was alcoholic, man. If I could just be alcoholic, then all I'd have to do is not drink, and I'd be okay. But there's something far more wrong with me than that. I didn't understand what was going on. See, I'm as sober physically as the guy saying that. And he's telling me that he's an alcoholic. That's the only reference point I got. He's telling me he's an alcoholic, and he's telling me that all he's done is quit drinking, and his life is just wonderful. My reaction to that is, I'm sober too, and I'm crazy. How could I be an alcoholic? I have just described to myself, without knowing it, the disease of alcoholism. The restlessness and the irritability and the discontentment of the alcoholic while sober. And the peace and ease and comfort that takes taking a few drinks. That's what I'm thinking about. I don't know that that's an alcoholism. I think if you're an alcoholic, all you got to do is quit drinking and you're all right. That's what they say. I'm not alcoholic, so I sit in a moment of confusion in Alcoholics Anonymous, wondering what's going on. But I went to another meeting one day. That's what I recommend. Just go to another meeting. And it was my day. It's the day I'd lived my entire lifetime for, probably. It's the day I lived and did everything that I did in my life had driven me right up to the very gates of hell. And I didn't even know I was in hell. I didn't know that day that I was going to go sit in a room and somebody was going to put the key into the gate and let me out of there. If I'd have known that, you'd have a different speaker here tonight. Because if I'd have known that when I woke up that morning, I wouldn't have went to an AA meeting and I'd have missed it. See, I wasn't conditioned to go to Alcoholics for answers. I was conditioned to go to therapists and psychiatrists and sociologists and penologists and criminologists and lawyers and domino players and all my old partners running the streets. Those are the people I'm conditioned to go to answers for, not alcoholics. Why would you go to alcoholics for answers if you're not an alcoholic? But I went to this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous that day, and I sit in the back row, and a little guy that I knew did 23 years in the penitentiary, stood at the podium of Alcoholics Anonymous and told me something I've never forgotten. Makes more sense to me than anything that I know tonight. Don't make more sense to me tomorrow than anything I learn when I wake up. He stood at the podium and looked down where I was sitting and told me I didn't have to live like that anymore if I didn't want to. He says, you don't have to live like this no more. And nobody had ever told me that before. They'd been telling me since I was 7 years old that I shouldn't drink these things and swallow these things and smoke these things and shoot these things. But nobody ever told me how to live without doing it. What none of these great learned people ever learned every time I sit across the desk from one of them whether in my restraints or my straitjacket or no matter what state of condition I was in. They said it in juvenile hall. They said it in Hutchinson State Reform School. They said it in the Whittier State Reform School, in the Preston School for Boys, in San Quentin, and Folsom, the federal government hospitals, wherever I was at. They all said the same thing. Johnny, if you didn't drink these things and swallow these things and smoke these things and shoot these things, you wouldn't have any problems. What none of these people ever took into consideration was that every time they told me that, I was as physically sober as I am right now. How many times I wanted to scream out at them, "Good God, doctor, don't you understand? Don't you understand? Take it back to 1950 before I killed my little brother. Take it back there. Let it start all over there. I won't have to do this no more. Take it back to when I'm 12 or 13 years old. I'm offered scholarships to go to universities to play baseball. Take it back to then. I won't have to do these things." But I don't know these things. And they don't know these things. They don't know about an alcoholic. If you're not an alcoholic, you'll never understand why I drink anyhow, for Christ's sakes. But if you're not an alcoholic, I'll never understand why you don't. You ever watch some of them people drink? You ever watch them? I mean, they are pathetic people. I'm coming back on an airplane one day. My wife and I are flying back from Dallas, and they kicked us up to first class because the plane was overloaded. And we clear the air, and steward I come running down the aisle with a bottle of wine, and she pours a glass of wine for this lady sitting across the aisle from me. And I'm looking over there, and that lady gets this glass of wine and goes to sleep. She just took a nap. And the steward wakes her up pretty soon and offers her lunch. And she eats her lunch, hands back the tray, and takes another nap. She hasn't touched that wine yet. And I'm going crazy, for Christ's sake. I'm going to jump over there and strangle her or something, for God's sake. I'm trying to figure out what's going on here. And by the time we got ready to land in Long Beach, the steward went up to this woman, and she said to her, "Would you like your wine?" And she said, "Oh, no. It probably will make me sleepy." I want to say, "Drink it! What's wrong with you? Are you crazy?" See, I don't understand that. I don't understand why she would do that. But she wouldn't understand me taking a drink of wine and Shanghai in the plane to Mexico either. There's that much difference in the thought process between people like me and people like her. Once I take a drink, I'm beyond any type of control, anything. But she can sit there and say, "I don't understand that." But you see, the non-alcoholic doesn't understand the alcoholic either. And the difference being, not the feelings, the difference being is this reaction I have to alcohol and what it does for me. Damn what it does to me. Just think what it does for me. It does so much for me that I'm really not worried about the consequences. What I'm interested in is that instant relief at this moment. And it's always there, and it's just a drink away. That's simple. It's that much more simpler than working steps. I went up to this little guy that day and I said, "How do you learn how to live?" He gave me the greatest piece of information that anybody could possibly ever give an alcoholic, particularly a new alcoholic. He said, "Johnny, there's a book called Alcoholics Anonymous in the library. If you go home and get it, I'll go home and pray that you find some part of you in it." I guess he prayed real hard, that little fella, because I've been a student of our book from that day to this day, and the only thing I found in that book is me. I'm not looking for anything else. I'm not looking for a way to sober up the world or cure all society's ills or be the biggest name on the totem pole. I'm looking for a way to live peacefully and comfortably and joyously with me and you and God. That's all. The phenomena that takes place in my life is very simply this: the closer I adhere to the principles that are written in that book, And the more willing I become to share that knowledge in this fellowship, just for the sheer joy of doing it, the more peaceful and the more comfortable and the more joyous I live with me and the loving God that made me. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. I had a long period of construction ahead of me because I didn't know what was going on, but I had a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and it had some instructions there. And the greatest single event that ever happened to me one day when I was sitting in a room with a man doing what our program of recovery says is the fifth step. The greatest single thing that ever happened to me in my life was not coming to Alcoholics Anonymous or getting sober. I was sober when I got here. I was physically sober the day I got here as I am right now. It's not my children being born or my grandchildren being born or my lovely life that I live today or the wonderful woman I'm married to or all the good things in my life that are wonderful in my life today are not the most important things in my life. Or they're important, but they're not the most important thing. The most important thing that ever happened to me is sitting in this room with this man. I heard myself say to this man that I was an alcoholic. And from way down deep inside of me, there came a freedom that I carry with me this minute. You see, as I stand here before you tonight, I know exactly what's wrong with me. Exactly. I'm an alcoholic, and I suffer from a disease called alcoholism. I am not an alcoholic and anything. When I was an alcoholic and something or other, I could not have this program. And the reason I couldn't have it is I separated me from you. I'm a little better than you. I'm a little slicker than you. I'm a little hipper than you, but I'm not like you. I'm different. When I became just like you, alcoholic, it became my great pleasure to be able to practice the only program of recovery for alcoholics of my type in 7,000 years of recorded history. This is the only thing that's ever worked for people like me over a period of time. So I get to do it. Oh, I don't have to do it. I don't have to go to meetings. I get to go to meetings. I don't have to practice this program of recovery. I get to practice this program of recovery. I don't have to make 12-step calls. I don't have to go to institutions. I don't have to go to meetings. I don't have to be secretary or general service or central office. I get to. Those are great privileges and great pleasures that happen in my life because I get to stay sober, because I know what's wrong with me and I know what the solution is. I came out of that penitentiary on the 4th day of June, 1961, which will soon be 40 years ago. I had a dream. I didn't think it would ever materialize for the 19 months I was in that institution, or for at least for the last 10 or 11 months after I made that great discovery, that maybe someday you would let me come and sit in your meetings. That was all I ever thought about. And I said to myself, this little thing, I made this little deal with myself. I said that they will allow me the great privilege of coming and sitting in their meetings. I'll do anything they ask me to do. I'm very proud tonight to tell you that for almost 40 years of my life, I have done whatever it is Alcoholics Anonymous has asked me to do. And I get to reap the rewards of it all. I get to live such a great life. I didn't realize what was going on when I came out to Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't know anything about living life. I don't know how to live outside of an institution. I don't know how to go to work. I don't know how to do anything. All I know is that I got a book called Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have, to the best of my ability, completed the first 9 steps of our program of recovery while I'm in that institution in the 19 months that I'm in there on this thing. And I'm doing all these kind of things, and I don't know what's going on. And I come out of go home to see my mother, and she falls off the steps blind drunk. I picked her up and put her on a couch, said, Mom, I'm going to an AA meeting. She said, fine, I think you should. I'd like to be able to stand there and tell you that I got sober, and my mother got sober, and my dog got sober, and my kids got sober, and we're just a sobers. That's not really my experience, so I can't speak to you beyond my experience. My mother never got sober. My mother drank herself to death. It took her 30 years, but she finally made it. She'd come in from time to time. My mother was one of them type of people who drank alcohol till she could no longer drink alcohol anymore. She'd drink herself sober. Then she'd come and sit in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous until she could no longer sit here. And then she'd have to drink again. And went on and on and on and on. And here I am sitting smack dab in the middle of this magnificent program of recovery, enjoying all the fruits of this magnificent program of recovery and all the good things that happen. And I watch somebody that I love drink themselves to death, powerless to do anything about it at all. What I learned about that was that I don't have the power to get anybody sober, nor do I have the power to get anybody drunk either. I don't even have any power to keep me sober, for Christ's sake. Where would I get any power? My book don't tell me I got power, that I've accumulated power. My book tells me I've got a daily reprieve, and that's contingent only on my maintenance of certain spiritual conditions. It doesn't say that I have a lifetime of guaranteed sobriety. It says I have a daily thing. This is my day. This is my day. This is the day I get to stay sober. I don't get to stay sober today because I've been sober 40-some years. I don't get to stay sober because I went to institutions and made 12-step calls. I don't get to stay sober because I come to Columbus, Mississippi. I don't get to stay sober. I get to stay sober because today I'm doing exactly what I said I was going to do when I said I was going to do it. That's why I'm sober. I get to stay sober on today's actions, not yesterday's pastimes. I can't live in today's solution with yesterday's program. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. How I sit and watch my friends think that because they did something last year, it's supposed to carry them over to today. I hear stupid things in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's like building a bank account of sobriety. Somebody better read the book before they start talking about crap like that in Alcoholics Anonymous. At least from the podiums of Alcoholics Anonymous, where there are people sitting around here waiting to hear all this psychobabble nonsense so they don't have to do nothing. They don't have to sit around and wait till I get a few years in, then I can let the newcomer do it. You know, I hear stupid things in Alcoholics Anonymous. I hear people get up at podiums and say, now you newcomers, you're the most important people in this room. Oh, isn't that wonderful? Next to me, you may be the most important people in this goddamn room. After me, you're first. I didn't come here for you to get sober. I come here so I could stay sober. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. I was the last thing in this world my mother ever saw. A guy said to me one day, how long was your mother sober? And to be perfectly honest with him, I had to tell him I didn't think my mother was ever sober. He said, well, she was in AA from time to time, but she wasn't sober. My mother was in a state of undrunkenness. See, a state of undrunkenness is just the absence of any type of alcohol or chemicals in your system, but it's not sobriety. It's just undrunkenness. And the problem with being undrinking herself, she just fought these drinks. She had no program of recovery because she didn't apply it in her life, so she drank. And I sit at the bedside one day and watched my mother die. I held her hand. The last 2 months my mother lived was horrible, but I sat there every day in the hospital with her and took care of her and did the best I could do with her. Everybody else shied away, but there I was with my mother. And if you'd have went to my mother 5 seconds before she died and said to my mother, aren't you proud of your son, Johnnie? Man, he came out in penitentiaries, out of them gangs, out of them streets. He found out he was an alcoholic. He joined that AA, man. He lives a normal, decent life out there. Aren't you proud of your son? You know what my mother would have told you? My mother would have said to you, my son is not an alcoholic. His life got a lot better when he quit running around with them Mexicans. That's all I ever ran with. And I guess if you would talk to some of these fools who fall out of these psychobabble treatment centers with their intellectual nonsense, they would probably say things like, I guess your mama was in a state of denial. A denial is a river in Egypt. My book don't talk about no denial. I don't know what your book talks about. My book talks about a delusion. My book talks about a delusion that we don't know the true from the false. We think our alcoholic life is the only normal one. Unless we experience the peace and ease that comes with two drinks, we drink. We don't have any choice in that. That's not a denial. You know what a denial is? A denial is a lie. And the person who says they're in denial is just a liar. Period. You know why I know that? Every time I got arrested, I denied that I did it. I didn't do that. I deny that. That is a lie. If I don't know why I'm doing it, I don't know why I'm doing it. If I'm drinking because I think that's the only thing I'm supposed to do, I don't know my life is true from the false, why not drink? I think my life is the only normal one. And that's the way it is. I came out of that penitentiary. I went to a meeting one night. A guy walked up to me and told me he was going to be my sponsor. He was a mean man. Really, he was mean. You know what he said to me? Get a job. Go to work, Johnny. You're a bum. I told him, I'm not a bum. I'm an AA member. He says, no, you're an AA bum. Bums don't work. He said, get off of welfare, clown. I said, don't you ever say that to me ever again. I'll hit you. I ain't never been on welfare. He said, what do you call living in penitentiary? Self-supporting through your own contribution? I mean, he had an answer for everything, this guy. His name was Norm Alfie. He was the meanest man who ever lived. He never let me get by with nothing. He wouldn't let me drive a car because I didn't have a driver's license. Then I said, why can't I drive a car without a driver's license? He says, because citizens like me have a right to be protected from jerks like you who think you run all the rules out here. And I said, I never got arrested for driving without a driver's license. He said, but you may get drunk if you do that, Johnny. He says, you promised to live by the rules, didn't you? He says, you promised to live a different type of life, didn't you, where you didn't slide around and break the rules to suit yourself? I said, yes. He said, you either live by them or get the hell out of here. Okay, Norm. Okay, Norm. Because he made me. See, my driver's license has been suspended in 1948 for the rest of my natural life. That's a long time. And because he made me get a job, I had to get some way to get back and forth to work. So I went down to my parole officer and sniveled to him, and he gave me a temporary permit to drive an automobile so I could get back and forth to work. And finally I got a driver's license, and I called old Norm up, and I said to Norm, Norm, I'm going to buy a car, Norm. I got a driver's license. He said, do you have money for insurance? I just hung up. I'm not going through that with him again. So finally the time came, I had a driver's license and money for insurance. I bought a car and bought insurance and drove it up to his house, honked the horn, and waited for him to come out. He come around the corner of his house. I can see him right now, just like I can see you walking around the corner. He had one of them shirts on that has no sleeves, them little things on there, an undershirt, and a pair of jeans. He was barefooted, and he was skinny, and he talked fast. He come walking around there. He looked at me, and he looked at that car. He looked at that car, and he looked at me. And he walked up, and he put his arms around me. And he said, Johnny, I think maybe you're starting to get the idea. I said, I don't understand what you're talking about, Norm. He said, I think you're starting to get the idea that there ain't a damn thing special about you just because you got sober and joined Alcoholics Anonymous. Maybe you're starting to get the idea that you just have to do it like everybody else has been doing it all those years out there, and you get no breaks or no special compensation just because you happen to be a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. He says, as a matter of fact, in your case, and he always put this in your case, you got to do just a little bit more. You got to be a better driver than the guy driving around you. You got to be a better worker than the other people on your job. You got to be a better citizen than most of the people out there. You got to be a little more kind and courteous and considerate for everybody around you than most of the other people, because you are supposed to be or opposed to be or say you are a member of this magnificent fellowship called Alcoholics Anonymous, and you better behave like that in all your areas. Wow. I'm not ready for all that. I mean, I want some compensation. After all, I came out of them places, Norm. I'm not killing myself anymore, Norm. Who cares? That's the way he treated me. I used to go to meetings with him. I went to a meeting with him one night. I was sober a couple of years. He still don't trust me to drive him, so he drives me. And I'm at we have a coffee break out on the coast, and while they're having this coffee break, I'm back there fooling around at the literature table, which is a dangerous place for egotistical alcoholics like me. And a guy tapped me on the shoulder, and he turned around, and there's some starry-eyed clown standing there, and he looked at me and he said, "Johnny." I said, "Yes." He said, "I heard you talk the other night, man." He said, "Do you know you're a miracle?" I said, "Really?" What brought that about? I mean, what was it I said? You know how humble we are. Just feed me. And he went on and on and on for about 5 minutes until they rang the bell. I come running back down to the chair, and I moved in and sit down about where she's sitting, and I'm staring out the window. I'm trying to see where my star is out there. I know it's out there somewhere. My spaceship is coming to get me. I know I'm really doing something, and old Norm is watching me, and I'm sitting there. I'm gone somewhere out there, Neverland or something. I'm so magnificent, I'm ready to throw up thinking about me, and it's just wonderful. And we're on the way home, and he's driving, and he's looking at me, and I'm staring out the window, and I'm not saying anything. I'm in a state of spiritual intoxication from my magnificence. And he said, "What's the matter with you, jackass? You smoking that stuff again?" Then I looked at him. You know how you can get kind of sarcastic and stuff when you're in front, and I said, "I don't think you're going to understand this, Norm, but I'm a miracle." Old Norm didn't understand that. I mean, he slammed on the brakes, damn near ran into the divider, and screamed at me. "You're what?" I said, "I'm a miracle, Norm." He said, "Where do you get this nonsense?" I said, "The guy told me in an AA meeting." He said, "You're not a miracle, jackass." He said, "Alcoholics Anonymous is a miracle, and you're just a small part of it." Now, I don't know what that does for all the miracles in Columbus, Mississippi. But I can tell you what it's done for me. It's kept me small enough to stay here. You would never imagine in your wildest imagination what an egotist like me would do if I believed I was a miracle. You can let your imagination soar. We'd probably be hiring some Greyhound buses to take us all to Waco so I could do it right this time tonight. I have that type of an ego. I know that. I know that. There's no doubt that in my mind. That's why I have to go to 4 or 5 or 6 meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous a week, even after all these years. That's why I have to have a sponsor who is stronger than my head. That's why I have to have the support and the criticism and the continuation of a home group. That's why I have to have all the things. That's why I'm not able to say no to AA requests. That's why I got to do my job here, because I have to have these things. They may not be necessary for you. I mean, you may not have a big ego. You know, you may not be overly important. You may be a miracle for all I know. But I can't get to believe in those type of silly things because they'll keep me out of AA. I'll be so spiritually magnificent I'll be of no earthly use to anybody. So I have to do these things. And I get to do them. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. I've been taught by some magical people. I was taught about, well, I got to tell you this story because James always puts this damn note on the podium for me to tell this story. He thinks it sells tapes. I think he has a hidden agenda there, but anyhow, when I'm in the penitentiary and I'm getting into Alcoholics Anonymous, there used to be a guy that come up there. And I learned about commitment from this man better than anything that I know of. Why I've come to understand that there's no distance too far or no journey too troublesome that I can't make it. And I lived up there and knew an Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm about a year into AA, and I'm my job is they had this little man named Tehachapi Bill who lived 10 miles in this little town up in the mountains, used to come to our meeting every Thursday night. He was the only guy to come up there. And I remember one Thursday night, my job became, after I got sober, was to go out and stand and wait for Bill and walk with him to the meeting. And I'm standing out there one night, we have a big snowstorm come, and the snows and the roads closed, and I walk out there, and this cop says to me, this policeman says to me, standing at the gate, he said, "What are you doing out here tonight?" I said, "I'm out here waiting for Bill. He's coming to the meeting, and I'm going to meet him and walk him back." And he says, "He ain't coming, Johnny. It's a snowstorm. I mean, the roads are closed." And I looked at him. I said, "He said he's going to be here, so I'm going to wait for him." He said, "Well, you can wait for him if you want to." He said, "But he's not coming. The roads are closed. There ain't no way to get through. We can't get through from town." And we go through this batter, this guarding me for, and he's making fun of me because I'm in AA and all this kind of stuff that they have a tendency to do, and about all this stuff, and I'm foolish for standing out in the snow and in the cold, and they keep beating on you long enough, I guess you're going to give it up. And I was just about ready to give up, and I thought, well, it's 10 or 15 or 20 minutes after Bill's supposed to be there, so I guess he's not going to come, so I'm going to walk back over to the mess hall and go to the meeting. And I feel a little dejected about this thing, and I step outside of the guard shack, and I hear a noise. It's ding. And I look down and listen for ding, ding. And I turn back to this guard, and I said, "Do you hear that?" He said, "What?" How they are. You want a smart remark. I said, "Listen out there." And you hear ding, and it gets a little back. Ding, ding, ding. Ding, 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 ding. Ding, ding, ding. And I'm looking down the road, and the dinging is getting closer and closer and closer, and I'll be son of a gun. In about 10 minutes, here come old Bill up with a horse and a sleigh, with his little bell ringing. He'd got this horse and this sleigh, and he'd come 10 miles through these old snowstorms over these roads that were closed, and his horse and sleigh, to come to his Alcoholics Anonymous meeting on a Thursday night because he couldn't get downtown to go anywhere else, and it was the only meeting within 50 miles of that way. And you ought to have seen the look I gave that guard. The sad part about that little friend of mine just died about 3 weeks ago, and they buried him. But I called him every day, every week. For the last 40 years, I called him and kept in touch with him for 40 years. And I went to see him whenever it was possible to see him in Texas. And I love that little man, because he was one of the reasons, he was the people who sat in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous and saw this thing happen to me, whatever it is that happened to me in that penitentiary. And my life is good. I run around with a lot of people in my life. I run around with an old man by the name of Chuck, and he was more father than any father I've ever known, and I used to ride around with him, and I always try to read things to him or say things to him that would impress him, because I loved him so much, and I wanted so much for him to impress him. I mean, you know how you are, how you want to impress your father, or how you want to say something that would make him pat you on the head and say, "Son, I really love you," and all this, and I never would say things. I'd say things to him like, "Well, this or that," and he said, "That's not the way I said it." So one night we were at a meeting, and I was back at the table again, and I picked up a piece of literature that I'm sure he was going to approve of, so I could read to him on the way home. We had a long ride back, and we're riding down the road, and I said, "I'd like to read this literature to you, Papa." And he said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "Well, let me read it." I picked it up on the literature table. It's approved. And he said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "It was Why We Were Chosen." He said, "Hold it. What makes you think we're chosen?" I said, "It says in this thing here why we were chosen." He says, "We're not chosen, Johnny." He said, "We're all God's kids. If I am, you are, and if you are, I am. If I'm not, you're not." He says, "He makes the rain to fall on the just as well as the unjust." I said, "Then if we're not chosen, how come I'm sober? How come I'm sober, Papa? I know people who are far better people than I am who aren't sober. How come I'm sober?" And he had a funny little way of laughing. He said to me, "That's very simple, son." He said, "You've learned that you're one of God's kids and you act like it." And I said to him, "How do God's kids act?" He says, "They just wander around in the world and they try to help God's kids get things done that need to be done. and they do it for free, and they do it for fun. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. You know, I've been very, very close to three of the most active men in Alcoholics Anonymous. One was my first sponsor, Norm Alpe, and the second was my Papa Chuck, and the third one is my current sponsor, Clancy Emerson. If Norm had lived, he'd still be my sponsor. But he's not. He died the day before my 22nd birthday, and so Clancy's been my sponsor for a little over 18 years now. But these are the most active men that I've ever known, and when I die, then I get to wherever I'm going. If there aren't people like Chuck Chamberlain and Norm Alpe and Clancy Emerson and all the people who've gone before me, Joe Lease and people like that, I hope I don't even want to go there. If there ain't flowers and little birds singing and people like that, I don't want to go there. And the reason I don't want to go there is because I know what my life was like before those people came into it. It was a dark, gray, hateful place with bitterness and anxiety and hurt and fear and frustration all the time. And these people came into my life and they cast a little light in there, and they made that light shine brightly, and they told me to walk toward the light, and I started walking toward the light, and every once in a while I'm bathed in warm, bright sunshine. Then every once in a while, because of my selfishness and my self-centeredness, I cloak myself in darkness and stumble around until one of them turns the light back on again. And then I can walk for a little while in the bright, warm sunshine. As I stand here before you today, I'm a man who has no wants for anything whatsoever. I'm married to the most wonderful lady who lives upon the face of this earth, and I love her very dearly. I have the love of my children, the love of my grandchildren. I have the respect of the people that I work for and the people I work with. I have the love of the people that I sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous and the love of my sponsors. I have a purpose and a direction of life, and I live most of my life in peace. What a tremendous thing to say for an alcoholic. I never brought any of those things with me to Alcoholics Anonymous. I brought darkness with me. I brought bitterness and hate and no hope and fear and frustration and anxiety and violence and all the things that have made up my life. The selfishness and the self-centeredness, to get out of my way. I want, I need, I gotta go. And because I come and sit with you, and because you gave me the tools to clear up the wreckage of my past, to allow me to live in the warmth of the sunshine of the Spirit, to live happy, joyous, and free. You told me if I would do these things, that these things would happen to me. And because I believed that you believed, I started to believe. And so I moved out of the darkness into the sunshine. This is a wonderful life if you're an alcoholic. And if you're not an alcoholic, I really don't know what to tell you. I can tell you that I believe that anybody would apply the 12 steps of this program to their life would get better. But I do know that if I'm an alcoholic, it's not a matter of whether I work the steps and get sober or not. It's a matter where I live with any degree of comfort where I never have to drink again. It's the most amazing thing that I know of. A guy that I sponsored once upon a time said to me one time, and I never will forget this, this guy looked at me and he said, "Johnny, do you know if you keep on doing what you're doing, you're going to keep getting what you're getting?" I thought about that for a while. Do you know that's probably the most greatest piece of truth that any human being could possibly ever tell another one? That really means that you can't think your way into right living. You got to live your way into right thinking. That's what it means. Now, this guy who gave me this thing, and a plaque that I hang over my wall that I see every time I leave my door, this guy forgot that, and he quit doing certain things and started doing other things, and about 10 or 15 years ago he started drinking and eating pills again, and he's no longer with us. See what that means very simply to me, that if you're sitting in this meeting and you're restless and you're irritable and you're discontent, then you keep on doing what you're doing, you're going to keep on getting what you're getting. There ain't no way to beat the deal. But by the same token, if there's some peace in your soul and some joy in your heart, and you've discovered a God of your very own, and you have love in your heart for your fellow man and the people about you, then I think you ought to keep on doing what you've been doing, because I'm sure you're going to keep on getting what you're getting. You see, I don't know about another living soul because I don't live inside of anybody else's skin. I can only tell you that for me, and only for me, I'm going to keep on doing what I've been doing, because I sure do like what I've been getting. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Johnny. I really did enjoy that. On behalf of the Unity Convention, we have a little gift for you. It's some Mississippi State cheese. Yes, enjoy. I hope it get through customs. Okay. Thank you. No, I think James got a tape for you afterwards. I'm not sure. All right. If there's not anything else, let's all stand and close in the usual manner.
James, I hope you've enjoyed Johnny's talk as much as I did. The man who drove the sleigh through the snowstorm in the sleigh bell story that Johnny just told was Bill McElrath of Tyler, Texas. Bill was an engineer who had drunk his way onto Skid Row and had gotten sober in 1956 and was 3 years sober in 1959 when he carried the message to Johnnie in the San Quentin prison in the Sierra Nevada mountains of California. San Quentin is in a remote location, and Bill's company was stringing some power lines through the area at the time. I had the privilege of meeting Bill on a number of occasions over the past decade or so. And I once asked Bill, why did you go to all that trouble to this snowstorm, to this blizzard, to carry the message into that prison that night? And he said, well, it's simple. I told those men that I would come, and I had to do everything that I possibly could to make sure that I kept my word. So I found a horse, and I found a sleigh, and I made it there. And he said, besides, there wasn't another meeting within 60 miles. And if I didn't make it to that prison that night, I wouldn't get another meeting for the next week. As Johnny mentioned, Bill went to the big meeting in April 2001, continuously sober since 1956. A grand and glorious member of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous who helped many, many people. I don't have a full-length talk by Bill, but each year at the Tyler anniversary at the Old Timers meeting, Bill would speak briefly, and I have his last such talk in January 1999, and I want to share that with you now.
Don't wind this thing up. We're about out of time. He has the longest sobriety, to my knowledge, in and around Tyler, and does a lot of work. He can't drive at night anymore, but he still makes meetings and tries to carry the message. So, Bill, would you come up and wind us up here?
Hi, I'm Bill, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is February the 25th, 1956. I'm real grateful for all of those years of sobriety. It's been a daily commitment to me. In fact, I got all mathematical last night and figured out it's been 15,678 recommitments to staying sober for 24 hours. Now, I'm not much at giving a talk about like old Junior Samples when it comes to giving, but when When I came in here, I was washed up completely, and I was messed up entirely. In the ball game of life, I had reached a superb position as a bench warmer on the scrub team in the minor leagues of life. And that's about the way it was. I came here because I could go nowhere else. I was through. I come under the banner, white flag of abject surrender. I was through. I could not go any farther. I was a whipped dog. I've been traveling through the back alleys of life with the dead rats and cats and stinking garbage, winos laying in their own excrement and puke. This was my trail through life. And I was whipped. And I came in and asked for help. Well, they put their arms around me and told me that this was a good place if I wanted to quit drinking. They said there's no cure for alcoholism, but we meet, we talk with each other. We've got a program whereby we just don't drink. As long as we don't drink, our alcoholism doesn't bother us. I thought that sounded pretty good, so I was happy that these people accepted me. In fact, the first meeting that I went to was in the Veterans Hospital in Lakewood in Long Beach, California. And they didn't ask if there was any newcomers there. They just started in. But the guys that talked said the right thing. They told about stealing the grocery money out of their wife's purse to get a jug of wine. They told about standing out in front of that old whiskey store at 5 o'clock in the morning knowing it didn't open till 6, with their hair standing on end and their eyes bugged out of the socket, the cold sweat dripping off of them. They were talking my language. I knew what the hell they were talking about. I'd been there. I said, I'm home. These are my kind of people. Nobody told me about all of my fears or my psychological problems and all of this junk. They was just there to keep from drinking for another 24 hours and to carry the message to the others that are just coming and wanting to join the program. Well, it was wonderful. But that's the way it was when I come in. I was through completely. But then when I left that meeting that night, I felt elated. And the next morning I got up and I was elated. And they told me to try this program. They said, if that second step bothers you any, they said, don't worry about it. Fake it till you make it. Believe that your sanity will be restored. It's insanity that causes you to drink. Hell's bells. There's nothing else. Anybody that's been through hell like a operating alcoholic and then goes back and drinks, he's got to be insane. There's no other way to define it. That's it. So they said, ask for help. Ask for help. Well, I did, and I was trying to believe. I faked it. Maybe I'm still faking it. I don't know. But anyhow, I get up every morning, my feet hit the floor, and I say, I'm Bill, and I'm an alcoholic. I have a little meditation, and I ask about it, and I get the same answer every day. Every day I get the same answer. Don't drink alcohol. That's the word that I get. And then I try to follow the path dictated to me by a God of my choosing. It doesn't make any difference for this Zoroastrian or Baptist or Catholic or Egyptian. It doesn't make a damn bit of difference just as long as I believe and know the guidance. I know that I'm not going to get any help. I ask for guidance, and that's when I try to follow what I should and live like I should live. And by doing that, it's been a wonderful life. I've enjoyed AA. I've met some wonderful people. My best friend that I have in this world, he was an inmate in a prison in California when I met him. And I learned some things from those prisoners, plenty of things. I learned that they were pretty brave because when you go to AA in prison, you're not Alcoholics Anonymous, you're Alcoholics Unanimous. Everybody in that joint knows that you're going over there with a wino, and it takes a pretty tough old guy to stand up under the ridicule of his peers, because that's the thing that bothers most of us more than anything else, is worried about being ridiculed by our peers. But anyhow, we made it together, and I learned some things in that prison from these old boys. One old big old black shuffling boy there, one day he says, I didn't know what I was going to do. He says, but old Tehachapi Bill, that's what they called me then, he told me what I was looking for, and I thought to myself, my God, what did I say? What the hell is this? He says, he told me I was looking for peace of mind. And I said, well, that's not too bad. He says, so I asked the preacher about that, and the preacher says, well, he says, you got to change your ways. So what do I mean change? Well, he says, just change where you can. He says, the next morning, he says, I woke up and I reached down and picked up my right shoe to put on, and then I remembered. I always put on my right shoe. So I put on my left shoe. I was changing. I was changing where I could understand. He says, now I know that I don't have to impress a soul on earth. He says, I don't have to win any arguments. He says, I don't have to prove a thing. That's a wonderful lesson to me. I've carried that with me every day of my life since then. I don't have to impress anybody. Although I try all the damn time, I know that I don't have to. And I don't have to prove anything, although I'm always trying to prove some fool damn thing. But I know that I don't have to. And I don't have to win any arguments, although I never give up trying. But I know these things, and it helps. It's been a beautiful thing being here with you wonderful, courageous people. And when I say courageous people, I mean just that. Probably the most courageous band of people in the world. When the Public Health Service built a hospital in Lexington, Kentucky for the narcotic addicts, our people had just started AA. They said, well, they're not going to let those junkies outdo us. So they hustled down to Washington and got hearing there in the health department and said, if you're going to do this for those junkies, why don't you do something for us winos? And they says, well, we'll take it under advisement. So they went back home, and in about a month or so, they got a letter from them. And they says, well, we turned it over to the medical scientists, the psychiatrists, the psychologists, and the theologists. And they all studied this situation, and they all come back with virtually the same answer. They thought there was some help maybe it could be brought about to the narcotic addict, but they said for the alcoholic, there's absolutely no hope. So they cast you out. They cast you out there on old Skid Row, you know, that old steep hill paved with greasy cobblestones that the farther down that you slide, the faster you go till you meet your ultimate destination in an unmarked grave in Potter's Field. But no, bless you people, God bless you. You had the courage, you stood up and faced defeat and refused to be defeated. Oh, how glad I am you did that, because when I needed it, when I was through, when I was whipped, crawling, whining, begging, y'all were there. Said this, come on, come with us. You don't have to worry anymore. Life can be beautiful. Oh, how right you were. It's been a wonderful thing. And with the help of you fine people and some of the greatest that I've ever met in my life, and know right here in this room some of them are today. Made my life a different story. And I had almost 43 years voyage upon a golden river. How beautiful and wonderful it is. They taught me, like old Chuck Chamberlain said, the little carpenter from Galilee said, unselfish, loyal, and benevolent concern for the good of others should be your way. At first that sounded kind of odd to me. I'd always been reaching out there. Finally I found out what it meant to be a giver instead of a taker. There's no comparison. No comparison. A giver is the way to live. It's wonderful. It's great. You people have done this for me, and now I have a faith that I can live by and a self that I can live with and a work that I can live for. Someone to love and to be loved by. And I can praise men now for what they can do and not criticize them for what they can't do. Nobody can do everything. And I can give of myself and forgive others and live with thanksgiving. Glad to be alive, but not afraid to die. But best of all, I'm not afraid to live either. God bless you all. I love each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Bill, at the January 1997 Old Timers meeting, reading the poem, The Touch of the Master's Hand.
I've been able to stay sober a day at a time from then. It's been a wonderful thing. And they asked me to come here tonight to read the poem, The Touch of the Master's Hand, which is the theme of this meeting, and Mr. McFarland's favorite poem, so they told me when they called me up. Well, I was real happy that they asked me to do that because it was one of my favorite poems, and especially it was my favorite poem about Alcoholics Anonymous and the people in it. I want to thank Olin, Gene, Sonny, and Jim, and the others who were connected with getting this together, to get it together, because I've been coming to these kind of things for a long time, and I'm kind of like that old mule that the Missouri farmer entered into the Kentucky Derby. He didn't expect that mule to win that Kentucky Derby, but he thought maybe the association would do him some good. And that's the reason I come here, because I think probably the association will do me some good. And it was a little bit trying for me to have to get up there today, shuck my winter cocoon, and take a bath before the vernal equinox in order to come down here. Well, it's real great. I'm real happy to be able to do that, because I always feel so comfortable when I'm around a bunch of AA people, because I'm an alcoholic, and I know that the AA people give me the strength and the courage and the wisdom to stay away from that drink today. I got that off pretty good right at the start. It was just one day. Just one day is all you had to work at this thing. Then the next day, make another commitment. I've been doing that for several years, and it's worked out real good. I have enjoyed it very much. Now, this poem is a wonderful poem, and I don't want to take anything away from it, but there's 4 lines from a poem by that old barroom poet of the Klondike days, old Robert Service, of the men who don't fit in. And looking out over this crowd tonight, I think there's quite a few out there just like me. We were men who didn't fit in. Those 4 lines, it says, he forgot that his youth had fled, forgot that his prime was past, till he stood one day with a hope that was dead in the glare of the truth at last. There it was for me, the glare of the truth at last, in that little old house up on top of the Tehachapi Mountains in California, when I saw myself exactly for what I was. And I knew that I had to do something, and I fell on my knees and I said, God, whoever you are, whatever you are, I don't understand it. I said, I'm not looking for anything tangible. All I want is some guidance. Please give me some guidance. And it came to me just as clear as anything ever came to me in my life. I got my answer right there. It says, don't drink any more alcohol. That was it. The rest was up to me. I had the message. So I went and asked my wife to get a hold of a friend of mine and take me back down to the Veterans Hospital, and I said, I'm going to Alcoholics Anonymous this time, but I'm down. And that's the way it got started, and I'm real happy about it. Now this poem fits in pretty good with most of us alcoholics. The Touch of the Master's Hands by Myra Brooks Welch. It was battered and scarred, and the auctioneer thought it scarcely worth his while to waste much time on the old violin, but he held it up with a smile. What am I bidding, good folks? Who'll start the bidding for me? $1? $1? Then 2? Only 2? $2, and who'll make it 3? $3 once, $3 twice, and going for 3. But no. From the room far back, a gray-haired man came forward and picked up the bowl. And wiping the dust from the old violin and tightening the loose strings, he played a melody pure and sweet as the caroling angels sing. The music ceased, and the auctioneer, in a voice both quiet and low, says, what am I bid for the old violin? And held it up with the bowl. $1,000, and who'll make it 2? 2,000, and who'll make it 3? 3,000 once, 3,000 twice, and going and gone. The people cheered, but some of them cried, we do not quite understand the change of its worth. Swiftly came the reply, with a touch of the Master's hand. Now many a man with life out of tune, battered and scarred with sin, is auctioned cheap to the thoughtless crowd, much like that old violin. A mess of pottage, a glass of wine, a game, and he travels on. He's going once, he's going twice, he's going and almost gone. But the Master comes, and the foolish crowd never can quite understand the worth of a soul and the change that's wrought by the touch of the Master's hand. Thank you. It's impossible for me to delineate in mere words the joy that I feel standing up here when I look up at the many, many serene and smiling faces in this audience. And they're serene and smiling because when they were at the end of the rope, they came crawling in as I did to AA, and there they felt the touch of the Master's hand. Thank you. God bless you. I love each and every one of you.
Thank you, Bill.